large change projects, creating people management leadership programs, and mentoring aspiring directors. And Della will be talking about maintaining the human connection when working remotely as part of a dispersed team. Again, I think it's fair to say a real challenge that many of us have had to deal with over the last 12 months or so. So welcome, Della. Lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us. You're just on mute. Sorry.
There we go. I nearly got there with the camera and the slides, but not the microphone as well.
That's all right, actually. 3/4 of the way there is absolutely fine. And I think, to be honest, I think everyone in this session today that's joined us today must have used that at least once during their surely it's the buzz topic, isn't it, of the year, I suppose. Exactly. But anyway, yeah, that's all good.
Great. Okay, great. Well, thanks very much for that. And so the last session of the day, I'm going to talk to you about the human connection, and if I can get my slides to move on, there we go. And we'll talk a little bit about why it's important to maintain that authentic contact with your team, and I'll talk to you a bit about some tactics for making that happen. And I'm sure, like many others, you will have found this lockdown trickier than the previous ones, and for me, the novelty's well and truly wearing off. And if you're a leader of a team, and some of the service desk teams that I've run have been quite big, you might be struggling yourself, and yet you've still got to motivate and connect on a human level with your own teams. And maybe this sort of way of working just isn't natural to you. Your preference might be to be in the office, and I know a lot of call centre leaders and managers like to be in, looking at their whole team, walking up and down the desks and seeing the boards and getting that kind of buzz from it. And so this isn't natural to many in this industry. And I've heard people say, we'll deal with these issues when we get back into the office, but unfortunately, we are a long way perhaps from getting back in. So just a little bit about me. So I've worked in customer services all my career, really, from my very first job. I was managing an enterprise service desk when I was at Deloitte. I was there for 12 years, last 4 years as the Director of Customer Services, looking after all of the contact centres, so IT, HR, Finance, Central Business Services and Partner Desk. And very much along the lines of what Manish was just talking about with web chat, self-service, and trying to encourage that journey. I took redundancy 2 years ago, and I'm now a consultant and executive coach, a massive advocate for human leadership, which I'll talk about today, and that need for individuals to keep it real and keep engaging people as individuals. I'm a mum of 2, so I've needed flexibility, and human leaders who've been able to help me navigate different parts of my life as and when things change has been massively important in my development. So just first of all, why does being human actually matter? Why can't we just crack on with looking at the data and the stats and the fixed rates and so on? Well, actually, there are a lot of stats, and I've heard some throughout some of today's presentations about with employee engagement and so on, that 85% of people report that they are unhappy in their workplace. And bear in mind, some of these figures are all pre-COVID, actually. So there are not many studies coming out yet that tell you the true impact of the pandemic. And actually, happy employees are not only more productive, but they also take less sick days a year. So if we can engage with people on a more human level, then we have more rewards. And I think that, remote working at the moment is often meaning that people are not having any human contact or connection for days often, other than people that they work with. They can't go and socialise with people. You're not even really encouraged to leave your house, apart from going shopping. You can't do much at all. So work colleagues are potentially the only route for people to have a conversation. So we'll talk a little bit now about being human. And as I said, it's about treating people as individuals. And I've been on a lot of training courses. I've seen a lot of people go on training courses that talk about, you know, how to be a team leader, how to be a supervisor, manager, a director, etc. And a lot of the content in those courses talking about how to be a team leader, they talk about how to treat the team. So you're going to learn here that we're going to motivate the team like this, and this is how you delegate to the team. But unfortunately, that sort of language means that often a team leader will come back thinking about how they work and how they are going to share, how they are going to delegate to everybody as one, as a group. But unfortunately, what they miss there is that what works for you might not work for me. What motivates you might not motivate me. In fact, it's probably guaranteed. And then if you've got a team of 10, 20, 100 people, you're going to have to be a bit more nuanced in what you do. So when I talk to people about being human, it's not just about individually for us to be human, but if you've got a responsibility for more managers or team leaders, supervisors in your area, is actually to try and encourage them to be more human, be more engaging, and share that experience and create more of a culture that this is just how we are. We don't just talk about the stats and the bad stuff, we actually engage. And the stats here just show, you know, I think we can probably all of us on the call identify someone that we've worked with who we've classed as a bad boss, someone who didn't motivate us, didn't listen to us, didn't respect us. And we can kind of remember how that made us feel. And the evidence is that, you know, managers can actually influence up to 70% of our performance. And you often hear that people don't leave a job, they leave a boss. So some tactics from me, and I hope that people don't think that this seems too simplistic, but I've been in a lot of organisations with a lot of teams. I'm coaching quite a lot of people now, and what I'm hearing is that some of these basics are actually still missing. It's a privilege to look after people, and I think for me it's about never assuming that you know how someone is. So these tactics are, at first glance, could be seen as, well, that's obvious, but actually I would just challenge everyone to think about how much of this they're doing, and if you're doing it, great, but are your team leaders and supervisors doing it consistently as well? And I heard Kirk say, you know, that regular investment, this isn't something you just go and do tomorrow, this is something that you need to be doing all the time. So first thing here would be, you know, asking a question, how are you today? Oftentimes we just ask that kind of impulse question, how are you? Fine. How are you? Good, thanks. And that's kind of our statement. We don't really think about it, and it's just almost like a handshake. But if you ask, how are you today, you are really asking the person to hone in on what they are actually feeling today. When we ask someone just how are you, they could be thinking of a list of 100 things. You know, I didn't sleep very well, I don't feel great, I'm a bit busy, my parents are not well, my kids are playing up, what do you want to know? If you ask someone how they are today, they might say, actually I'm a bit nervous about that big meeting today, or I didn't sleep very well, and you know, whatever, but they'll be a little bit more specific. It's important to make time. And I heard Kirk saying, you know, if you haven't got time, if you can't make time, then what are you doing? One of your prime roles as a leader is to be making time, and you know, looking at how you can prioritize that in your diary and your schedule is really, really important. These are your people. Without your people, you can't run your service. I noticed a great deal of formality has come in with meetings. So the kind of you know, the usual, we'll walk to the coffee machine and have a natter, we'll go to the Pret and get a sandwich and have a catch up, we'll just knock by someone's desk and say, how are you, how was your weekend? That of course has all gone out of the window, and what's been replaced is a series of regular half-hour, 1 hour, more formal slots of specific agenda items. So what I would encourage leaders to do is to get back to having some more, not all, but some more conversations where it's a bit more of a light touch. You know, just proactively ringing someone without it being booked in, asking them how they are, how was their weekend, trying to find some commonality, just to have more of a light-hearted conversation than purely down to business. Then there's looking at body language. Now in the office, you could probably sense a buzz of a team, or you could sense when things were quiet. You could sense when there was something dramatic going on. You could hear someone's raised voice. Now what we've got is a camera that can tell us potentially what people are doing or what they're thinking. And I was on a call in the summer where, a usually bubbly, light-hearted person would turned up to a meeting and just, had their head in their hands. And it wasn't very much of a cue, but it was out of context. And so I was able to then follow up and find out something. And something had been going on in her private life, and it had just seeped out in the way that she was presenting. So keeping an eye on people's body language, any fidgeting if they're normally still, if they're very quiet normally, if they usually have their camera on but now they've turned it off. These are little cues that allow you to ring up and just say, is everything okay? But it shows that you're noticing. And then there's listening. But really listening. So if you've asked the "how are you today" question and somebody says, yeah, I'm really nervous about that meeting this afternoon, don't just jump in and go, yeah, me too, God, I'm really nervous too, and blah, 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 because they'll just probably shut up. So instead be asking, oh, okay, what's troubling you? And really listen and watch the body language, and following up with some more follow-up questions to show that you're engaged. And this is all really about developing relationships, finding about the individual person and what makes them tick, rather than thinking of my team of IT service desk people are like this. They all like a competition. They all like a challenge. They're all motivated by overtime. Probably not. This is about individuals. And finally, on here is just that sense of trying to remember. If you can remember some details about somebody, they said they were going to do something at the weekend. Bit difficult to know what people would be doing at the weekend at the moment, nothing open. But if someone says, they're going to be digging the garden or putting bulbs in, or they're going to be watching a film, making a point to remember that their mum's just gone into hospital, they were just about to have the vaccine, and following up on those questions. When someone asks us something and shows that they remember, it does actually make us feel good. So what you're doing by doing it yourself is creating that sense of importance. I'm a real advocate of positive leadership and focusing on the good stuff. People do leave organisations because they just never get a word of thanks. So always try and praise rather than criticise. And even if your service desk stats are a bit poor, try and find the things that went well. Start meetings with what went well here. I see that the numbers went from 80% to 82%. How did you do that? What was going on there that went well? The target's 90%, but you want to show that you're seeing that there are improvements. Better that than turning up and saying, well, the stats we were expecting 90% and we're only at 82, and giving everybody a hard time. Because we know ourselves that if we turn up to a meeting where someone just lays into us, we walk out of the meeting room, or we end the meeting thinking, oh, well, I thought I was doing a good job, but now I'm not. Whereas if someone says, I can see you're making progress, it's good, then we feel a bit better. It's human nature. We're waiting for the praise. You can do other things like start each meeting with successes or shout outs. Try and encourage others to say thank you to others. So if someone has helped someone with some training, or has helped someone with just helping a hand or doing some overtime, just start to say thank you. And finally, as a human, now more than ever, focusing on well-being. These figures are from Mind, and these are actually pre-pandemic, which they're commonly in use. 1 in 4 of us will have a mental health issue. I suspect that will be higher at the moment, and 75% will have an issue in our career. But more than ever as a leader, pointing people to company resources, if you've got an EAP helpline, any articles on intranets and things about well-being, that's really great. But more than that, as if you're doing human leadership, it's about actually leading by example, taking breaks yourself, telling your team to take breaks, having if you've got a long meeting or a workshop, actually putting in a coffee break and a wee break, and just telling people to go away and have that, because being human matters. And if we're suffering from something, I suffer terribly from migraines, and if you can share that actually I'm not feeling that great today, people see us as human. I think people often hold leaders up as some great pedestal, that we're perfect and that we know exactly what we're doing all of the time. Well, of course we don't, and of course we don't feel well, and we're probably feeling stressed by this pandemic just as much as everybody else. But if you can share some of your own thoughts and perhaps your own vulnerabilities about your own state of mind, then people will see you as human. Then they will perhaps feel it's a bit more of a trusted environment and share things more with you. And from that, I think that's where you get the loyalty, the more productivity, hopefully less sickness and more retention, which knocks on into the overall performance of the team. So that's it from me. A couple of things on here in terms of things that I can help you with, workshops and so on that I run. It'd be great for, if you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn and my website's there. And finally, I am taking part in the conference in March, and I'm part of the leadership panel, so I might get to see you again another time.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Della. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to that. We mentioned that a few times today. It should be a fantastic event, actually. Yeah, you know, it's really good to see some pragmatic ideas, even though, you know, some of them, as you mentioned yourself, you know, you hope that people don't see these as too simple, but they're the basic sort of building blocks. And you know what? You've worked in a corporate environment. You know what the corporate ladder looks like. You know what it's like to work in an environment where where figures and numbers and data can sort of make relationships abstract, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in the wrong organization with the wrong sort of board in place, how difficult it can be to be a person in that organization. And certainly we've seen over the last few years that demographic shift with people just making decisions, younger people making decisions that this isn't going to work. I'm not going to stay here for 20 years. I'm going somewhere else where the work resonates with me, where the culture resonates with me. And we've seen some big organizations get that really, really right. I love the thoughts around that we've seen today around inclusiveness, around authenticity in leaders, about being vulnerable. Have you got any tips, or have you worked with anybody who is in a corporate organization, who has to wear a suit and a tie, who has to wear a certain corporate image day in, day out, and can't be authentic, or is challenged, or it can't be vulnerable, or is challenged by that? Have you ever dealt with that? And if so, what maybe are the 2 or 3 things that person was able to grab onto to try to recognize the change and to be more authentic? How have you seen that?
I have seen that quite a lot, actually, in terms of people sort of gripping grimly on to perhaps some old ways that, you know, I'm also an advocate for flexible working, and I think that people gripping onto the idea that everybody should be in the office, everybody should do certain shift patterns and so on. And actually, I think call centres and service desk environments lend themselves very much to a much more flexible approach. We certainly do that with lots of shift patterns. I think that for me, trying to influence those sorts of people, whether they were in my team or perhaps more senior to me, was to really try and sell to them the benefits of why we would need to make a change, and sort of using that evidence to say, you know, we've done a trial of flexible working, or we know that we can do this and it's working, so they could see firsthand that this is something that they should embrace. And I think they're just trying to almost just keep them up to date. They might not necessarily have understood some of what the millennial market or our apprentices and things were thinking. And I think there's a middle layer that leadership has, depending on where you are, but it's a responsibility to kind of share the messages that are coming up from the more junior staff and engagement surveys, or, you know, what the morale's like, and actually be sharing it upwards, because you know, if you keep talking about the fact that people are leaving in droves because there's no flexible contracts, or they don't like the fact that we've got this atmosphere in the office, or whatever it is, then you know, they are going to, if they're really focused on stats and things, they're going to live and die on the stats. Well, the stats can only perform if you've got great people. So I think my responsibility there was to sort of try and be that linchpin between feedback and then trying to talk to some of those people who needed a bit more encouragement, shall we say, to be a bit more authentic, a bit more human.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that transparency, being brave enough in your statistics, in how you act, that transparency is so important. I think it's so much easier to work with people and teams that are happy to be transparent, you know. But yeah, anyway, another topic I think that we could talk about for a long time. Thank you, Della.